Mr. Chavan, it's a pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure too.
I'm just trying to take off from where I left with the other panelist. Spreading primary elementary education to needy children across India. And your special focus, as you mentioned earlier, is improving the math and science. So just wanted you to elaborate on that, on how you focus on these subjects and what is why you picked up this as a core competency of Pratham.
You see, the current situation in India is that 97% of the children are enrolled in schools. More than 98-99% of India's habitations have a school within 1 kilometer of a child's residence, which means that there is a thing called school, there is a person called teacher, books are being provided, uniform being provided, midday meals being given, in a very large proportion. There is a last mile problem with 2 or 3% of children. So I don't think the problem in India is to give a school to a child. The problem is how to give education to the child. There is a Right to Education Act. We call it the Right to School Act because the education has not reached here. We do a large-scale survey in which we find that this is true, that huge proportions of children are going to school. Not every day maybe, but they're going to school.
Right.
But the bigger problem is that the children reach 5th grade and only 50% of them can read even a grade 2. About 40% can do a long division, the 60% can't. There are a lot of children who are in 6th, 7th, 8th grade also who do not have sufficient knowledge of numeracy. So the focus that we would like to place on, and we are a non-governmental player, we are not running a whole school. We think the critical intervention that is required in all government schools to make them productive is to teach reading fluency, reading comprehension, writing, and arithmetic. If that is achieved in the first 5 years of schooling, then the children can navigate the rest of the curriculum relatively simply. The teacher's burden is reduced. Of course, there are many more problems, but as a non-governmental player and an organization that survives on donations and grants, we prefer to focus on one thin slice that is going to be critical for the transformation of education. So that's why we've chosen reading and math as the main interventions.
How do you intervene? I'm trying to understand the model of teaching here.
So we innovated a learning to read technique. Now it's a tragedy that in the developing world, children are not taught to read. They're taught alphabets and then their books, and some of them can learn to read and the others don't learn to read. In this country, for example, reading is a separate skill which is taught by a trained teacher. That is not so in India. Although we have a script that is very reading friendly, we have not used those advantages to teach our children to read. Now what we did was, we said, okay, can we put in activities, alphabet reading, etc., together and see how quickly children can learn to read as a remediation, not from the first grade, but first grade also the same thing works. And what we do now is we are working in 15,000 villages spread over 15 states of India, but our actual spread is 18 states. So in those 15 states, in those 1,000 villages per state, we actually create a demonstration model where one full-time person is in charge of 20 villages and he picks and chooses schools to go to. So every 3 months he goes to 3 to 6 schools depending upon what is, and he runs what is known as the learning camp.
Okay.
So the total cumulative days in a learning camp is not more than 23 to 25. So 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, and come back to the same school, 10 days, and so on. If you do that, then we find that over a 3 learning camp period, most of the children who could not read earlier, 80%, nearly 70 to 80% children, learn to read and learn basic numeracy.
Wow.
Now, that is only a demonstration thing. This is not to say this is education.
Sure.
Once this is done, and this happened recently in Bihar, as I was explaining in the panel, is that when we did this, a civil servant, an IAS officer said, why can't I do this with my teachers? If your volunteers and your paid people can do it, why can't I do it? So we had 3 people from our group actually helping this civil servant, who in turn got the officers to first of all go and test the children, try to teach them, understand that there is a problem, understand that there is a solution, and then those officers in turn led the teachers to improve the reading and numeracy levels of 18,000 children. And they found that, yes, it works. The point was that they had never acknowledged that there was a problem in the first place. Because the whole thing is that the teacher is busy teaching the syllabus, which means the textbook.
Right.
Never mind that the children can't read it. So when you change the focus and say that, look, children must learn the basic skills, and when it worked with the government schools, we took that civil servant to Mr. Nitish Kumar, the Chief Minister of Bihar. He saw the data, he talked to the officer, talked to us, and he says, why can't this be done across Bihar? And so now it's a policy across Bihar. Of course, it's taking time to actually go down, but it's changing. We are doing the same in the state of Madhya Pradesh. We are saying the state is doing the same in the state of Maharashtra. So what we find is you have to persuade government to first of all say, look, you changed your attitude. It's not about teaching textbooks. It's about teaching basic skills. Once the children have those skills, they can learn many things on their own. And now the Indian Planning Commission, Union government, has also changed its stance. Earlier it was more spending. Now they have insisted that we want to know what the learning outcomes are. In fact, globally, this whole thing is changing. Earlier, globally, the emphasis was on opening schools and sending teachers in. But it's well known now. We are pioneers in that work since 2005. We started the annual Status of Education report, one of its kind across India and anywhere in the world, where only volunteers and citizens are doing this without government being involved, to see how many children are going to school and what their learning levels are. Now, globally it is acknowledged that schooling is not learning. Learning requires a separate focus. So that is our model. So you demonstrate, bring governments to understand with evidence, and then persuade the governments to change their policy and the practice in the classroom by basically becoming learning outcome focused. And once that is done, then the schools should start changing.
I have one question though, because government support is very critical. You can't do much without either the bureaucracy or the government, and you'll be dealing with, you said, only in a couple of states. Where do you see, because the problem is endemic, the resistance to change and the hope of getting the direct benefit for themselves. How do you overcome these two challenges when you're dealing with either the bureaucracy or the government?
I think there is a resistance to change, but there is also now it is obvious to many leaders, and the numbers of leaders who see that change is necessary is increasing. And it's happening in different ways. For example, in India now, people are voting with their feet. Once upon a time, 85% kids were going to government schools. Today that number has come down to 65%. And we see that that number will grow to actually or reduce to 50% of children going to government schools and 50% going to private schools. That means the whole system is in danger, which means people who want to defend the system need to do something about it. And the private schools are not doing all that great either. When all these children come out, the industry is saying, the kids who come to us for jobs actually don't have any skills. They can't read, they can't measure. So what are you guys doing? And so everybody understands. Earlier, oh, this is poor children, underprivileged children. This has nothing to do with underprivileged children anymore. It has to do with the general problem of education in India. So I think there is a sense that change has to happen. And so we are sort of contributing to that momentum by giving evidence that things can be changed. The belief, if you believe that nothing can be changed, then nothing will. But if you see that it can be changed, it is not the most difficult task in the world, then things do happen.
Well, like I said to other panelists, I think it's a great cause and it's going to have a lot of impact where it is absolutely needed. So again, appreciate all the effort and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thanks.